I'm Cortney Hanrahan.
I'm Sam Azadian.
And I'm Robbie Bromley.
We're in Dr. Y's period 856, and we did our project on the controversies and concerns of genetically modified foods.
To start, you should probably know what a genetically modified food is.
Genetically modified foods, also known as GM foods, are foods made from crops that have been given specific traits through genetic engineering.
Okay, now let's briefly inform you about the history of these crops. It was in 1973 that scientists first learned how to alter the genes in an organism. This proved that humans now held new powers over nature. Some of the very first experiments were done in E. coli, and the first genetically modified crops to be sold were tomatoes.
Now you may be asking yourself, how are these crops actually genetically engineered? Well, there's 6 main steps in this process. The first step is probably the most important step out of all 6 of them. In this step, the desired gene is chosen and isolated, such as a gene that makes strawberries sweeter.
In the second step, the gene is cut into the plasmid of a bacterium called Agrobacterium tumefaciens. Once this is completed, the cells are taken from that plant, which is step 3.
Step 4 consists of the mixing of the bacterium containing the plasmid with the plant cells in a dish. Now, do you really want the food you eat to be grown in a dish with a plasmid containing bacterium?
In step 5, the cells are tested to see which ones accepted the plasmid. And in the final step, step 6, the cells who accepted the plasmid are encouraged to grow.
There are so many items in our world today that contain genetically altered genes. Insulin, growth hormones, fruits, vegetables, and canola oil are just some of them.
It is really important that you learn some of the benefits and hazards before you form an opinion of these crops.
There are quite a few benefits to these crops. They can reduce herbicide use, increase opportunity for reduced tillage systems, and even reduce pesticide use.
Not only can they do that, but they can also kill a fewer number of organisms opposed to many alternatives, such as broad-spectrum pesticides. They can even reduce insecticide use to control insect dispersers of pathogens.
Genetically modified foods can also prevent the movement of traits to non-target species, prevent the movement of introduced species to other ecosystems, improve the nutrition of people whose diets depend greatly on rice, and reduce their energy used in fertilizer production and application.
While there may seem to be a large assortment of benefits, there's basically a never-ending list of risks and hazards. Genetically altered crops reduce the in-field biodiversity levels that may reduce the ecological services provided by agricultural ecosystems, promote the development of Bt resistance, which will eliminate Bt as a relatively safe pesticide, and kill non-target caterpillars and butterflies, such as the monarch.
Genetically modified crops move genes into non-agricultural ecosystems where the subsequent increase in fitness of weedy species could possibly eliminate endangered species. And not only do they do that, but they also facilitate the creation of new viruses.
These crops also prevent farmers from developing their own supplies needed to adapt to local conditions, disrupt local ecosystems if an ecologically limiting nutrient or protein is produced, and add to access and leaching from agricultural, degrading human health and reducing biodiversity. Not only are there risks and hazards, but there are also a lot of effects on the human body as well. Children are maturing way faster than they used to and starting to show an antibiotic resistance to diseases.
The book Genetic Roulette identified 65 health risks of genetically modified foods, more susceptible to allergies, such as problems with milk.
Genetically modified crops have triggered thousands of toxic and allergenic reactions, thousands of sick, sterile, and dead livestock, and damage to pretty much every organ and system studied in lab animals.
Now, let's talk about the development of genetically modified crops. They are, quote, produced through modern biotechnology that enables genes to be transferred across different species and even across different plant kingdoms to introduce desired traits into a host plant. So basically, the genes are inserted artificially instead of sexually.
One example of beneficial gene insertion is when you insert a bacterial gene genetically into the plant's genome. It allows the plant to make its own pesticide.
Some more examples of these crops are as follows. In soybeans and canola, the fat and acid composition is altered. Also, in the papaya, the resistance to viral infection is conferred. Another example, which is probably the most widely known about, is involving the tomato. With tomatoes, the ripeness time is delayed to allow for a longer transportation time and shelf life.
Many of you might be sitting there wondering, how much does it cost to create a genetically modified crop? Well, no need to worry anymore. We'll tell you.
Genetically modified foods are, in the long run, more expensive than regular crops. Of course, they are cheaper for the farmers to buy, but they are more money for the labs to produce. To cover the cost of this extra money needed to manufacture the crops, when you buy them, there's a technology fee. This technology covers any research and development costs, as well as some profits for the manufacturer.
The business of genetically engineering crops is a private industry, so, of course, money is always needed to continue the research.
In order to keep up with all of the blows to the genetically modified crop's reputation, the International Service for the Acquisition of Agro-Biotech Applications, or the ISAAA, was formed. This is a non-profit organization that focuses on the spreading of the popularity of genetically modified crops, and it's supported by corporations, foundations, and even government agencies. Here are some of the actions taken all around the world that have to do with genetically modified foods.
In 2003, Zambia cut off the flow of genetically modified foods that left a famine-struck population, as most people ate them. Then, in 2005, they realized the harmful effects of blocking these foods out, and they allowed the importation of genetically modified maize, an important crop to Zambia.
In 2004, Hugo Chavez banned all genetically modified seeds in Venezuela.
Also, in 2005, Hungary banned the importation and planting of genetically modified maize seeds, although they were still authorized by the EU.
A big event in genetically modified food history also happened on August 18, 2006, when American exports of rice for Europe was interrupted when the crop was confirmed to be contaminated with unapproved engineered genes, probably there due to cross-pollination.
Genetically modified crops are found in many places that one wouldn't normally expect. The practice of altering the genes of crops is done pretty much everywhere. Most of the crops, however, are made in North America.
Genetically modified soybeans are made in Brazil, and genetically modified cotton is made in India. By 2006, it was said that 89% of soybeans, 83% of cotton, and 61% of maize were genetically modified. The number of countries involved in the genetic altercation of crops has basically doubled compared to the 52 million hectares.
The United States, Canada, China, and Argentina produce 99% of the world's genetically modified crops, so basically they're pretty much everywhere.